Afghanistan's borders have gone through many changes throughout the years. Understanding how they have been changed can help explain how the art through the years has been shaped. Where modern-day Afghanistan borders are today was actually a part of the Ghaznavid, Ghurid, and Timurid empires from 962 to 1506 AD, according to the Library of Congress. During that time, the Silk Road had many routes through these empires, and as a result, this area became a huge trade center. With Buddhist influences from the east and Hellenistic and Egyptian influences from the west, it's no wonder the Afghanistan arts are rooted in many different cultures.
National Geographic's exhibition on Afghanistan's hidden treasures from the National Museum of Kabul presents metalwork from the Bronze Age of the Oxus civilization in present-day northern Afghanistan, which lasted from 5500 BC to 2900 BC. In 1989, many priceless historical objects were secured in the Ministry of Information in the Central Bank Treasury Vault at the Presidential Palace. Among the treasures from the Presidential Palace Vault were gold pieces from the Bronze Age, hundreds of ancient coins, gold bowls with animal imagery, and pieces from the Bactrian hoard, which is a collection of about 20,000 gold, silver, and ivory objects that were found in burial plots in northern Afghanistan, none of which contained writing.
According to journalist Lauren Cometeau in her Time article on Saving Afghanistan's Art, Greco-Buddhist and Hellenistic art is the artistic manifestation of Greco-Buddhism, which is the amalgamation between classical Greek culture and Buddhism. It was created in a time span of about 1,000 years between Alexander the Great's conquest in the 4th century BC and the Islamic conquest of the 7th century AD in Central Asia, when Alexander the Great's successor I-Kunam took over Bactria in the Achaemenid Empire. Its origins can be found in the Hellenistic Greco-Bactrian kingdom between 250 BC and 130 BC, located in what is now Afghanistan. Greco-Buddhist art is defined by strong idealistic realism and the first representations of Buddha in the human form. Much of this art has been found in the Hada, Afghanistan archaeological site and by the late King Zahir Shah in 1961. However, much of this art, such as the Buddhas of Bamiyan, were destroyed by the Taliban in 2001.
In the 1st to 4th century AD, ivory was used by India to make carvings. This practice eventually made its way into the Kushan dynasty, where small carvings were made. These carvings, as stated by The Guardian, were lost during the time of conflict in Afghanistan in the 1980s to 90s. They were, however, found and are now being returned to Kabul, where they can be properly preserved.
Islamic art emerged in Afghanistan during the rule of the Umayyad Caliphate and preserved from the 7th century onward. This art form not only encompasses all art and architecture created from the Muslim faith, but represents a unique culture formed from various regional and stylistic influences throughout the years. As stated by the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the 4 basic elements of Islamic art that emerged are calligraphy, vegetal patterns, geometric patterns, and figural representation. These styles were portrayed through various mediums, including intricate painting, rugs, and tiling. Islamic art was first displayed in the United States at the Sackler Smithsonian Museum exhibit. This featured more than 60 of the most important Quran manuscripts ever produced, giving the United States an unparalleled view of the ancient culture that flourished throughout the centuries in Afghanistan. These ancient Qurans were transformed from an orally transmitted message to a written, illuminated, and bound text produced by highly accomplished artists from the Islamic world. Owned by the elite, these prized books gave a unique look into the prestigious life of the wealthy throughout Afghanistan's tumultuous years. Islamic art is a very important aspect of Afghanistan's cultural history because it served as a cohesive force between the diversity that prospered throughout the time period.
Throughout Afghanistan, there is a type of puppet show typically called buzz-baz, which is researched thoroughly by author Mark Slobin in his article Buzz-Baz, a musical marionette of northern Afghanistan. This specific variation is found in northern Afghanistan and is played alongside the jumbara, a two-stringed fretless lute. In other parts of Afghanistan, people use different instruments or call the puppet show by a different name, but the same concept applies. The puppet, usually a mark or marionette, is attached to the instrument so as the performer plays the song, the puppet moves. Even though it is called by different names, this is a practice that is found all across Afghanistan.
According to National Geographic, in 1988, Afghanistan was in the middle of a civil war. Curators from the Kabul National Museum of Afghanistan began to worry for the safety of their artifacts, so they began to make preparations to move it all to two safe houses. By 1989, all the artifacts had been moved to either the Ministry of Information or the Central Bank Vault at the Presidential Palace. The only way to open the Presidential Palace Vault was to have all 7 keys, which were distributed when the vault was originally sealed. The holders of these keys took their job very seriously, and if they were to die, they had to pass the key down to their eldest son. By 2001, the Taliban had taken over Afghanistan and had begun a campaign to destroy all non-Islamic art. This led to the destruction of the artifacts in the Ministry of Information. Thankfully, 2,500 artifacts, which included Bronze Age gold pieces, ancient coins, and the Bactrian hoard, were saved in the Presidential Palace. The Bactrian hoard is important because it has 20,000 gold, silver, and ivory pieces from burial plots in Tilya Tepe in northern Afghanistan. In 2003, the Taliban was overthrown and Hamid Karzai was elected as president. Hamid was then able to confirm that the artifacts from the Presidential Palace had been preserved. This led to an international effort in June 2004 to preserve ancient treasures from Afghanistan.
Afghanistan fine art was protected during the time of the Taliban by art masters in the Senai Art School. The Senai Art School in Afghanistan is a school with the finest fine art department in Afghanistan. The school teaches Afghanistan fine art, which encompasses 7 forms of fine art including classical dance, calligraphy, music, sculpture, oil painting, ceramics, and embroidery. During the time of the Taliban, all of the buildings were destroyed. Students still studied art, but they could not paint portraits. They could only create Islamic calligraphy, miniatures, landscapes, and ceramics. However, much of the information was still destroyed in the war. When asked in an interview for the Bayman Fine Art Gallery why he stayed at the school during the Taliban, the head of the Senai School, Mr. Saeed Musad Hashimi, stated, "If we don't stay, others don't stay. Who will stay? So we have to stay and fight through our art. If all of the artists of Afghanistan left, how could we fight darkness in the Taliban? So we stand and fight and never give up."
Following years of political and economic turmoil and limitations, present-day Afghanistan is seeing a resurgence in the creation of unique art forms, many of them influenced by war. Early Afghan art was developed by predominantly male artists and was severely limited by the Taliban rule. In the 1990s, the Taliban limited artistic expression to calligraphy, ceramics, and the drawing of immortal shapes. Not only was artistic expression limited, but paintings and books that were recognized as direct affronts to the Taliban were destroyed. Beginning in 2009, international funding for the arts has flowed into Afghanistan from both the United States and Europe. Much is currently being done to these areas to reinstitute art studios, traditional clay sculpting schools, and archaeological foundations in order to reopen the doors and expand upon Afghanistan's lost, forgotten, or otherwise suppressed traditional teachings and cultural heritage. Carolyn Christoph Bakarjeev, curator of the 13th Documenta, states that art has a major role to play in the social processions of reconstruction, with imagination as a crucial force in the process, and in ways that do not isolate people even further, but provide opportunities for the opposite.